Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Breeders' Cup Pink Sheet Insider. I'm your host, Andrew Champagne, alongside Saratogian columnist Mike Veach. We profiled Friday's edition in an earlier video, and now we will look at Saturday's races at Santa Anita, a stacked card.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that indeed, Andrew.
We'll look at a couple of races on the undercard first. Of course, the big one is the $5 million Breeders' Cup Classic. However, obviously, a lot of races on this card. And we will start with a race that some people are calling the flagship race of this year's Breeders' Cup, the Breeders' Cup Mile.
Interesting. Well, we all have an interest in Wise Dan. He's in here. He showed so well at Saratoga. Comes in off 2 Grade 1s. And in my view, he's in contention for not only a division title, but Horse of the Year as well. Explosive stretch kick. It is a very deep and dense field in my view, but you know, there's a lot of rooting interest with him in my view, and a repeat of his last 3 has got to make him something to beat here. He
is, however, facing a much better field, you can argue, than his last 3.
I'll not argue it.
A couple of the big horses in here. One, of course, Acceleration, the European Invader.
Well, you know, I mean, were it not for Frankel, he'd probably be 2 to 5 in here. But, of course, he's run against what some people call the best horse of all time in Europe, or maybe even the world. He's definitely a real deal. There's a filly in here I like. They've been known to do well in this race, called Moonlight Cloud. I think she's very fascinating. But all in all, just a terrific edition of the mile.
Before we move on,
please do say, yeah.
This race is very light on early speed.
Okay.
With that in mind, I think obviously is in line to run an absolutely huge race. This horse, over this route at Santa Anita, ran a mile in 1:31 and 4, pressed on the lead. If this horse gets out to a first half in 47,
game over. That's bye-bye. I agree with you.
So we now move on to the Breeders' Cup Turf, which is a 12-furlong race later on in the card. And one of your favorite horses this year, one you profiled in the Breeders' Cup Pink Sheet, Point of Entry, is looking possibly for an Eclipse Award.
Andrew, he is one of my favorites. I don't know quite why he's grabbed me the way he has since Saratoga. Partly it's because of my respect for the way Shug McGahee gets his good horses to get good and stay good for a very long time. I believe he's also in the running for maybe 2 Eclipse Awards. Things have to break his way. 1.5 miles is just hits him square in the eye. He came out of the Turf Classic on a surface he did not like, by the way, very, very well. He's just a rugged racehorse. I think he's very, very much the one to beat here, going 12 on a surface presumably he will like. And I will even go on a limb and say that he reminds me somewhat of some of the turf greats. Manila comes to mind with his power.
He does have a couple of good horses to beat, some from Europe, including last year's winner, St. Nicholas Abbey. That said, though, Point of Entry, definitely a big threat.
I'm with him all the way.
And now we move on to the Breeders' Cup Classic, the capper of Breeders' Cup weekend, a $5 million purse. And Mike, we were talking a little bit before we turned the cameras on. This edition, through no fault of the current entrants, a little bit underwhelming.
Oh, I agree with that completely. This is not, at least at this point in time, not an edition of the Classic that looks like one of the all-time greats or even a cut below some of the greats in Breeders' Cup history. I do agree with that very, very much. There is a horse in here, though. I feel quite strongly about this. So strongly, I'm going to go, I think, quite light on the race. Game On Dude is just at home. He's been brought along so well by Baffert. I really do think, Andrew, he is the one to beat in here.
Game On Dude is the 9 to 5 favorite, and he should be there at the end. If there is a problem with Game On Dude, it's his running style with the way this race shapes up. Alpha is likely going to go to the front. Fort Larned is likely to go to the front. Handsome Mike, a 30 to 1 shot, might go to the front. Mucho Macho Man has early speed. And To Honor and Serve may also likely go to the front. Game On Dude is a front runner. Last year, he almost stole this same race on the lead before being run down by Drosselmeyer in the final strides. Game On Dude's a very good horse, and this is his home track. I'm just not sure this race sets up for him.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I see him as a lot more matured, a lot more settled, a lot more steady. Bob Baffert keeps him going pretty good, too, for quite some time. I do almost feel so strongly as it's his race to lose. 5 for 5 on his home court. And the others, it's just like, whose turn is it today to show up in a Grade 1? It's not as demeaning as it sounds. Personally, the one that you mentioned here, To Honor and Serve, he's had me hooked since he won the Remsen, which means I've lost more than I've won with him. But I'm even somewhat afraid of him of turning in a very good, but it's just, is it his turn?
You mentioned one of the three horses that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Last year, Game On Dude led most of the way, did all the dirty work in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but was caught from behind by a Bill Mott trainee. A very big chance that this happens again on Saturday night. Bill Mott has three horses in here, all with a shot. He's got Flat Out, he's got To Honor and Serve, and he's also got Ron the Greek, who won the Santa Anita Handicap earlier.
Keep right on going with him. I agree with you, yeah.
Well, the thing with Ron the Greek that I really like, experience over this dirt track at Santa Anita is so crucial.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
A lot of East Coast horses do not ship well.
That's
not a one-year estimate. That is a proven
that's
fact. I remember reading something on Twitter earlier this week. Only one horse in every dirt race at Santa Anita, for every Breeders' Cup race they've run there, has come in and won while training in New York.
Oh,
It is
wow.
an eye-popping
it is.
stat that says some East Coast horses just can't grasp Santa Anita, for better or for
Yeah.
worse. Ron the Greek can.
He can, that's a fact.
And Ron the Greek also has a great late running style. He's sort of bombed in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, but that's been his one bad race this entire year.
That's true.
So, Mike, Game On Dude, you mentioned. You said you're probably going to end up skipping the race. Do you really think he runs away and hides here?
Well, I just really feel strongly he's the one to beat. I just think he's. We often say that horses get best at 5 if they're brought along well. That's exactly where he's at. I just do feel that way about him. I think he's an old pro. I may, in fact, watch it. If I go with any money, I'm not going in exacta boxes here. I might just go back to my old To Honor and Serve and hope that it's his turn. Billy's no one to fool with, and he's one of 3 in here, so he wants it again. But yeah, Andrew, to be honest with you, I think Game On Dude is the one to beat in the Classic.
Again, a big weekend coming up at Santa Anita. 2 days of great racing, capped off by the $5 million Breeders' Cup Classic. That race going off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday night. That'll wrap things up for this edition of the Pink Sheet Insider. For Mike Veach, I'm Andrew Champagne. Be sure to check back to Saratogian.com for all your racing coverage.